Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Taking Chances. I got a really special guest that I've had the pleasure of spending a few conference calls with, or some Zoom calls over the last few months. So I have Magali Berville coming in live. Well, won't be live for you guys, but coming in today to talk to us a little bit about e-com and digital marketing. How have you been, Magali? Long time no chat.
Hello, I'm doing great. Yeah, very excited to be here today. Thanks.
So I've had the pleasure of meeting Magali through a colleague of mine, Kayla Dillon, who was actually on, a podcast episode of mine. And one of the last episodes with August Samples was just around the power of networking in LinkedIn. So I thought how appropriate. We didn't plan this before, but Magali and I have never actually met in person before, but we came in contact through a personal colleague that kind of connected us and trying to support one another the best we can. And once I got to know Magali a little bit, I don't know if she realized how different her story was from most marketing folks that I've spoken with. So I really wanted to get this out there today because I think for the folks listening, specifically going through a transition maybe in your career or even transitioning, within marketing to just a different niche, this is a great person to kind of get some feedback from. So Magali, tell me a little bit about yourself. Obviously I know, but tell our guests a little bit about yourself. Like, what is your background? How did you get started in this marketing world?
Yeah, sure. Maybe just to give a little background, I am French American, so born in the U.S., French family, and grew up back and forth between the two countries. So a bit of an international background. And I have been in the marketing space, but more specifically the digital space for the last 20 plus years. So I have been leading e-commerce and digital marketing for various companies. And you'll get to hear more, but I have been working from the agency world, client side, in beauty and in hospitality, but always in digital.
You've been on both sides, right? So just to kind of break that down a little bit too. So you've been both working for the client and then externally as an agency, which boy is that night and different. And then I think I heard you say beauty and hospitality. So
yes,
I guess number one, let me go back to, is there any kind of secret sauce having dual citizenship? So obviously you got to know me a little bit. Traveling has definitely impacted me in a positive way and changed me forever. But I'm just curious. I don't know if I've ever asked you this. Like, has kind of growing up on both continents and traveling in between, has that potentially helped some of your differentiation? Or talk to me a little bit about that.
Absolutely. I think just your ability to adapt to different cultures. I mean, I'm very lucky that I grew up in an environment where I was speaking multiple languages at a very young age. So bilingual French and English. And then that I think gave me the ability to learn more languages. So I more easily learned other languages after that, Spanish being one of them. So I'm fully trilingual and can have conversations in Portuguese or some other languages as well. So just the language abilities, I think, obviously in a professional context, can be very, very valuable. And I think in addition, the cultural kind of proficiency in being able to adapt to different cultures, and I've lived in the US, in France, in the UK, in Spain, and you just learn all these different cultures. Yeah,
you learn about the cultures and you learn a lot about yourself, I feel, too, once you get into those cultures, right? Because I know, at least for myself, I felt like getting out of America, so I've traveled a bunch in my life, but only in the last 2.5 years have I spent any prolonged time out of the States. You know what I mean? Like, prolonged is not 10 days, guys. It's like 3 months or so. Because I feel like I've traveled to a lot of places that I thought I loved until I moved there. It's kind of changed a little bit. But I would say this too, like, culturally speaking, now that I don't even know if I can still say I'm bilingual. It's pretty close in Spanish, but I think trying to learn 3 too quick might have hurt me a little bit. But I do find that in communicating, especially in business, in different languages, or just even communicating in a different language, like, I first have to stop and think, and I do think that helps kind of when we're hitting any pain points anywhere in life, whether it's relationship or business. I feel like you have a little bit more of a foundation of being outside your comfort zone, right? I mean, it's a big foundation of everything I know is not here. Everyone around me speaking a different language. I have to learn how to communicate, and then be able to communicate, like, conversationally is one thing, but at a business level is another one. So, like, to be able to do that, I know how hard that is, guys. Like, I've been doing this for the last few years. I still, My fiance still begs me to speak in English in Romania because I butcher the dialect so bad, and I give it a good effort. The effort's honestly there, but I do find that's interesting. And Magali, a lot of the folks I've talked to, that again, taking chances about elevating stories of folks that have really taken a chance on themselves and just how it's playing out. But I always find a similarity of somewhere in their background they've been through some kind of thing that's given them some type of foundational information to really like stretch upon, and so I think when you get into trying times, you have a little bit better of a foundation. So I understand living back and forth in between, and I might be asking this question more for myself, but I'm also curious, like, how did the marketing come to you? I mean, is this something that when you were growing up, is this something that you always kind of looked at and saw an opportunity? And then I guess from the marketing, was it hospitality first or beauty? And then maybe we can talk a little bit about how that kind of transition took place for you.
Yeah, I think I was definitely always attracted to marketing, and that's what I studied. Went to business school with a marketing focus, and then so major in marketing and international business. So very much following kind of like
your birthrights. Yeah, exactly.
My background. And so, yes, I always had an interest in marketing, but I think where it's something that I found along the way was an interest and passion for the digital space. First of all, because it didn't even exist when I was growing up. And it just kind of happened. And that's when I went full in. I knew.
Not to interrupt you, I didn't even think about that, though. So, I mean, you've seen the evolution from previous to digital to being there. So,
yes.
I mean, we'll get to this at the end, too, like with the rollout of AI right now, I know. So, like, what a transition that's been. But I'm just curious first, like, was hospitality first or was beauty?
So, I actually started out on the agency side.
Okay.
So, working for various digital agencies, interactive agencies, and that's where I was very lucky to have the opportunity to work across industries. So I was leading kind of digital strategy, 360 digital channels, and kind of all the campaigns and media, from developing websites to driving acquisition and retention for different brands. And I was working for clients in the beauty industry, in the hospitality industry, as well as finance, etc. So that's the beauty, in my mind, in my eyes, of starting out on the agency side. Is it's an amazing education.
It exposes you to a lot more, I guess.
Absolutely. You get to see so many different industries, so many different clients, business challenges, and you get to try things before anyone else does. So
I like it.
Yeah.
Do you think for someone starting off, like, so if you were to have a conversation with, say, someone just graduating and they had an opportunity for the same salary, do you think that foundational education, like, kind of continuing, is it better for them to go in the agency? I mean, talk to them about that, I guess, a little bit. 'Cause we get a lot of questions around there.
It's a great question. I do think it's a great first step in developing that knowledge and expertise across different industries, and even in the marketing space. In my case, it was more around e-commerce and digital, but even within that area, I really got to work across all e-commerce and digital activities, which is rare, which is really amazing. So when you're starting out, I think it's a great first step to grow and develop those skills. Yeah.
Is it safe to say, too, because I'm assuming on the agency side, you're probably also exposed, maybe not in the first 3 to 6 months, but you're probably exposed to a lot of B2B conversations that just never happen internally, right? So not only do you have to be great about what you're doing in digital marketing, but you also have to be able to convey what you're doing and making an impact to an external client who really isn't your boss, but is
absolutely
kind of overseeing you.
In my case, I was definitely more on the client services and account management strategy side of things. But that meant I was managing the relationships with clients. I was involved in pitches, in selling, and convincing. And then once you win a client, then I was leading that strategy, that relationship, and you present and you explain when there are problems, and you resolve, and you manage the communication, the internal communication within the agency, and then the communication agency
and the external
client.
too. Yeah, I mean, you're almost baptized by fire, but with love, like right out of the gate. So I do like that too. And, we get a lot of conversations where, and again, even in my industry, internal, external recruiters, the folks that can do both. And again, I hate to say it, but there's mostly bad external recruitment companies. It's one of the things that we're trying to change. Just had a conversation earlier today about that as well. Just, trying to put some good content out there. We'll probably get into a little bit of that in some of the next questions here. But I think, if I find someone that's been in both, but started on an agency, they definitely perform at a much higher level. And I'm sorry to say that that's black and white, but in my world, at least, it's pretty black and white. Folks that I just think it does a couple things, right? So I've seen this in our internal recruiters that we start to promote. It forces a lot of behaviors that most people have never been in. So if I take an internal recruiter and I put him into day 31, which is like, day out of training, and our workflow, sometimes you can see the white in their eyes, and it's just like they're glazed over of like, okay, so I'm going to not only recruit for this person, but I have to communicate with other folks. And it's just, you can see it's almost like they don't even know what they're afraid of. They just have never done it. So it's almost paralyzed. And we find that the longer that they've been internal, it's almost like a key indicator of like, they're probably not going to be successful for us. But if someone just worked for maybe not even the best company for 6 months to a year, even 2 years, but they got some exposure and they had a couple wins, like we can work with that because they have the confidence to kind of almost stand under fire. And I think it builds so much, not even just for marketing, but for, just for life in general of like, hey, I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm going to put my best foot forward. I'm going to communicate honestly, authentically. I'm going to try to do my best to fix whatever said problem the client has. But at the end of the day, we're going to put this all together. And what we see from a lot of folks that don't expose themselves to that kind of training is they tend to shy away from great opportunities later in their career, and like when I first talked to you, I would say,
I can see that. Yeah.
And you're the opposite of that. Even, and it's one of the reasons why you're here. When I first talked to Magali, I was like, do you know how different your story is? She's like, no. And I think that's fair because I don't think you're someone that really pats yourself on the back a ton, but I think from some of the endeavors that you've worked on and really just even the differentiation from the industries you're in was so unique to me. But So talk to me about how you've managed that, though, right? Like, I know you went from, and we didn't talk much about this, but I know you went from an external company to internal. How were those transitions? And then, tell me about that one, and then we'll dive into a little bit more about the industries, because I'm assuming there's some similarities, but there's probably some also things you had to break up with and kind of teach yourself some new tactics as well.
I think in terms of making those career changes and transitions, I mean, first of all, it was very natural for me to do those, but because I think, in going back to what I was saying earlier, from my background being used to adapting, I think just from an early age I was embracing change, and this has been deeply rooted in who I am and my behavior. And
it does make sense. How can someone else out there, I guess, that doesn't have, because I don't want this to come off like privilege, like we're both living internationally, do this. How can someone else get like comfortable being uncomfortable, though? Because I mean, that's ultimately there. So like before they're there, like what is some advice you could give to a younger person that's just coming out? Because I know that you didn't feel that. I felt that from the first time I talked with you when like there was no camera on. Well, there was a camera on so we could see each other, but we weren't filming anything. And it just was so stoic from you. You're like, well, I don't even know what you're talking about. It's just kind of what it came from. And we've had some time to think about this, but what are some good ways for someone to expose? Like maybe if someone's coming out of college or even finishing their studies, like, is there something that they could be doing to kind of build in some of this comfort level by stepping outside of their comfort level before the rubber meets the road, so to speak?
Exactly. I think you're always looking for opportunities to step out of your comfort zone. Yeah. I think that is the best way to grow and keep growing. And we were talking earlier about, the agency world. I do think that's one of the reasons that is a great kind of first step in a career, because you get exposed to different things, whether you like it or not. You get thrown in the fire, yes, but it's also, depending on your role, but for the most part, you're usually working with different clients. Just that, you're being forced to adapt, to understand how each one works, their company culture, their challenges. You get used to asking questions, to analyzing what you're seeing, the data you're getting, and all those skills will actually help you then adapt better to change, be more comfortable, and that's what is going to make it easier to embrace change and then push for change.
What was it like? And then I guess I want to ask the whys after this. Ask this first. What was it like for you transitioning then from the agency to and I don't want to assume for you, but I'm almost hearing like, is it safe to assume from what you're saying, like start off an agency, then go internal? So I guess like I want to ask that question, not just how it was. Like I'm almost looking for the advice on that as well.
For me, so that was definitely the goal to when I left the agency world to go client side internally. I just found it to allow me to get deeper in the business.
Okay, I assume that too. Yeah, so now you're talking about depth instead of broad.
Exactly. So agency side, amazing, exciting, great learning experience, but there's only so much you can do. There's only so much you are involved with your clients and your clients' businesses, and there's only so much you can impact. And it became clear and a little frustrating after a while that there was more, and I could actually get deeper by going internal. And so, and it proved to be true. And in my case, that's, I definitely enjoyed very much that change and being able to be a part of the business, a part of the decision-making team, and then evolve within that.
And you probably expose yourself to other nuances that you didn't even know were out there, because again, I don't want to say surface level for any of the agency folks out there, because I have an agency myself, but I think at some level it's a little bit more surface, even if you're trying to get as deep as you can external. You can only be as good of a partner as your partner is going to allow you to be, right? And I mean, we see that in recruitment all the time. It's like some people want to hold things close. We can't really help them that much. We tend to walk away from those kind of contracts because it's like, hey, we can do this, but we've really got to be an extension of your team. And if we're not really an extension of your team, we can't really perform like part of your team.
And you know what? Going back to what we were saying earlier, another reason why I do think it's very valuable to have people with agency experience who go client after is that you know how to manage your vendors and your agencies and your partners. And that is huge. I have found it's helped me personally, and people I have hired who have that experience, I can see the difference in how they manage client, vendor partners and agencies. Absolutely.
It's the same for, like, because I'm just trying to cross as many industries as you can. We see the exact same thing. Like, so again, we're in 4 industries really, really firm. I mean, you could probably say 6 to 7, but 4 industries that we're in really consistently. We usually start a new recruiter off, whether they have experience or not, and we get them broad. It's like, right? So we'll train them out on a bunch of different clients so they get used to doing this. But for them to really perform, then we kind of transition them into one niche and maybe even one role so they just get depth. And then once they've got that depth, so we kind of take them broad to expose them to so much and rattle them a little bit. I mean, I know that sounds maybe good or bad. It's rattled with love, but at first we would kind of want to throw you into the deep end with support, see how you learn how to communicate, kind of feast and famine, but then calmness under fire. And then when we transition them over to the industry, what we find is that there's a certain calmness that kind of goes with that. And it's like, okay, now the noise has kind of been settled. I just have to focus on this one thing. But I've had so many conversations with like all these different clients to kind of do this amount of revenue. Now I'm just going to talk to this one hiring manager or maybe 3 to 4, how many other accounts they have. But they really have the confidence that they wouldn't have had, and if we bring someone in, maybe even with an experience, but from internal, and I try to put them on 4 clients, they tend to tube, and not really because of anything with recruitment. I honestly believe it's a little bit of an imposter belief, and it just a lot of people these days are not comfortable being uncomfortable for a couple seconds. And I think this is, again, a reason why I have this podcast is like elevating these stories of like, hey, it's okay to feel upset for a little bit and to not know, but like, if you trust your boundaries and trust your vision, you keep walking towards it, it'll play out for you.
And for me, that has always been key, and one of the reasons, again, why I made some of these transitions. So not going from agency to client side. But then even with, once I was a client side, and my first client side experience was at Accor hotels, big, large, global corporations, thousands of employees. And I had them as a client
So
on
you
the
had some
agency
knowledge.
side.
Okay, yeah.
So I had some knowledge, how they were working internally, company culture, all the, challenges they were facing. And then that actually helped me once I was hired and was leading a team and leading e-commerce and digital for the North America region. It was definitely helpful that I had that agency experience, and I was able to adapt very quickly and know exactly what I needed to do on the client side. But after a few years of doing that, and I think another kind of driving force behind all my different transitions was the evolution of the digital space in and of itself. And so I'm someone who loves to keep learning, and I think I have evolved in my career also in a way that the digital space has evolved. So, yeah.
Sorry, I didn't want to interrupt you, but I feel like you're in an industry where you almost have to survive, right? Like,
You have
again,
to.
one of those things, like you got to stay relevant and on point.
Exactly. And that's what I wanted to get at. Like, you don't have a choice. And that's why, yes, in some cases you may be getting out of your comfort zone, but that's because you have to.
Yeah. If you're going to be cutting edge.
Things are changing so fast and constantly. And I love that. And it's very exciting to always be innovating. And one thing, for example, that I was finding on the hospitality side was I was getting to go very deep in many areas and data-driven areas, but the marketing aspect was sometimes very kind of surface.
Okay.
And other industries were evolving from a digital perspective very rapidly. And that's when I'm going to talk about the beauty industry.
So that's when you went to the beauty.
Exactly.
Did you leave? Because look, I'll say this first to maybe make it a safe space. I feel like the industry I came from, being hospitality, and obviously I've been out of it. I mean, we're still in hospitality as an industry, but I've been out now for about 7 years. I feel, as much as I loved it, it was the last industry on the planet to embrace tech, to embrace marketing, to embrace anything that was going on. And then when I really dive into the EBITDA of most of these, if I'm going to be honest, and I'm sorry for all my hospitality clients, but I've already talked to you about this, I don't think we really have challenged ourselves enough, because like I represent so many folks that are pretty big that don't have a CRM, Magali, that still don't have a CRM, that like we're talking national brands. And I'm like, okay, it's great that you do XYZ, but like, have we ever thought about connecting the marketing to the recruitment? Because it's kind of the same thing. It's a full cycle. So I see what you mean there. I guess you didn't say that. I'm saying it for you. Is that, did you leave for some better technology or some new things to do? Okay, fair.
I was seeing more innovation happening in the digital space, in the beauty industry. And to me, that was very attractive. And I wanted to be a part of that.
Was it beauty product based too? I don't know. I know it's a bit of lifestyle, but also product based, right? So talk to me a little bit about the difference from, I guess, marketing for, I don't have your background, so I'm just going to speak the language I know. Like, I feel that you're marketing more for like a lifestyle and an event in hospitality, and more like broad. And is it more specific when you get down to like, here's this product and XYZ, getting people to calls to action and getting to purchase?
The storytelling from a marketing perspective, the messaging is definitely more detailed. You're talking about ingredients. You're talking about benefits. You can visually show transformation, etc. So yes, the marketing and the messaging in particular are a lot more advanced. The travel industry is more lifestyle and aspirational.
There you go. That's the word I was looking for.
Yeah, and when I decided to leave the travel and hospitality space, at the time, that's when the beauty industry was becoming the most innovative industry and at the forefront of innovation when it came to digital and e-commerce. And that's what attracted me and convinced me that's where I need to be. And I had the amazing opportunity to join Moroccan Oil. So
Okay.
a big brand in the beauty space, hair care brand that was kind of created the space for argan oil, which at the time, before they launched it, was not being used at all in beauty.
Using it for some hair loss right now myself. So out there, it's some good stuff. I'm curious about this too. I'm assuming that even though it was cutting edge, you probably brought some nuances from hospitality and applied those to the beauty that weren't being done. I mean, is that a safe assessment?
Well, yes, because hospitality space, it was all about data, revenue, very KPI driven, which is so key. And when I first started out in the beauty space, it was more the marketing, the customer experience, and less data driven. Although that quickly changed, and that's what I brought, and the kind of digital transformation that I was leading for a company like Moroccan Oil was very much introducing customer data capture, how to leverage the data, and be very data driven to define your e-commerce strategy, your digital marketing strategies, etc.
So you kind of brought like the best of both worlds and kind of help put them together. I love that too. I mean, definitely, we see this sometimes too. Like, I'm definitely a data-driven person, but at the same time, I think certain times you've got to have built in, and I can speak on this from hospitality, that maybe your campaigns aren't going to be super profitable, but if you're getting your A to B done in alignment, you kind of got to eat that nut for a little bit. But I completely feel you there. Now, I know these transitions have kind of exposed you to a lot, and I know you've been in a couple different industries, and obviously you've got a great skill set that you built. What do you look for as a hiring manager? I mean, so like right now, and we're talking about people coming out, you've been in both industries, someone's coming to you, like what are some things that you're looking for from a candidate that's maybe defining differences from what else is out there in the field?
And I would say, especially in this space, e-commerce and digital, where things keep changing and there's constantly new technologies, et cetera. So the skill set is definitely evolving. Over the last 15, 20 years, I have built teams. I have expanded existing teams to support growth, et cetera. So I've seen a little bit of everything. I would say you're looking obviously for some specific skills and experience, which you can evaluate based on previous roles, et cetera, their own professional experience. But it's very much the person, the personality, the attitude, and trying to see the potential. When you're hiring, entry level roles or more senior roles,
I guess that's safe to break it down to you, because I'm sure your modality for how you hire. So let's talk. So entry level, let's talk about that first, I guess, and then we'll kind of go to a higher level position.
Yeah, entry level, you're very much evaluating the potential and how hungry are they to learn and to evolve and to adapt, and how are they going to fit with the team, with the larger company culture.
And you've been on some big teams, Magali, and I just want to ask you this too. Does it help a candidate, say, like, I don't know how many applicants you have for certain roles, but I would assume over a couple hundred at least, and maybe, at some of the larger ones, even over the thousands. Does it help if, like, a new prospect candidate sends an in-mail to you or an email, like, hey, I just applied and I'm looking to gain audience? Is that something that you would hinder, or is that something you think is a good practice from, like, sitting in your position? And maybe, has it ever happened to you to make a decision?
It's happened, and usually it's always a good thing.
Shows eagerness a bit. Yeah.
Yeah. I think what has definitely had more of an impact is if it is someone who is referring you.
Referral. Yeah. You know someone inside.
Absolutely. It makes a huge difference.
Giving the power back to the networking on our conversation.
Yes. But I would say entry level, it's also, I wouldn't be the only person having them meet with. I would definitely have the candidates meet with one or two of the more junior people on the team that they would be working with, and even some cross-functional team members. Huge impact. Yeah.
Exposing them to the rest of the team, getting feedback from the team. Hey, I'm going to oversee this person, but you're going to be working with them. Does everyone get along? It's democracy. Talk to me if are there many differences from hiring, like, say, maybe like a C-level executive or a peer. I'm sure you've done that in your career before. Someone at the same level or someone that you're going to have to be counting on for a little bit more than an entry level.
Getting a sense of how well you're going to be working with this person in terms of obviously skills, experience, but how have they worked previously with, similar departments and teams as yours, and it goes beyond just the skills. Again, it's personality, level of collaboration you can sense, and it's key. This is the world we live in. And what I do and what I've been able to do and accomplish has relied so much on collaboration, and digital transformation as a whole comes down to people. It is influencing decisions, it is educating, it is building trust. To people.
It's psychology. I mean, you're impacting behaviors. Just to boil it down at the raw sense,
Yes.
you're really impacting behaviors, and there's a certain behavior that we want to impact to have X and Y. And I just think it's to your point, it's so much more in depth than the average person thinks. And I think there's a ton of psychology that's involved in it, especially if it's done right. And look, great information from there. And I kind of want to put you on the spot. What do you look for from a hiring manager, right? Because I know you've got a ton of skill set. Because I like to give this stuff to candidates too. Like, do you have any kind of secrets of like questions you ask? Like when you're like, hey, I know what the culture is. This company's scouting me, but like, how do you find out like maybe the secrets behind the door, so to speak? I mean, do you have anything like that? I know I'm putting you on the spot with this one. I'm curious to your feedback.
I mean, it's a great question. I think it depends a little bit on the role, but in general, asking them about the challenges, and especially, let's say tomorrow you start that role. What are you, and actually asking that specific question. What, is there anything I'm going to find that you haven't told me?
Yeah, just being that direct, right? Like,
Yes.
hey, I love everything. We're ready to get into our relationship together. What is day one going to look like? What is day 45?
If I look under the hood, what am I going to find?
Yeah, I think that's good too. And we give a lot of advice to that too. I think there's some questions for folks out there that are watching this one from marketing that we coach on quite a bit. Asking what their top performer is, and so, hey, where am I on the chopping block, so to speak? So like, I'm going to come in and do X. What do you expect out of me? What is your average team performance like right now? How many promotions have you done within the last year?
What
was
does
your last
success
review
look like? Yeah.
I mean, so I really try to tell the candidates too, if you're really doing a good job, like, you can kind of turn the interview around, so you definitely want to showcase who you are. But I challenge most folks to go in and just have a conversation. Number one, you should have been completely vetted this concept before you go in there. You should know everything that you can possibly know from their digital presence that's out there. But I think asking questions to quantify that is kind of what we go in and coach on.
And sometimes also, again, depending on how the
conversation,
the conversation is going, but also trying to find out where the other people on the team or that, have been hired, where do they come from? What type of background do they have? What companies do they come from? Because it will give you a sense, like, are they looking for a certain type?
I get that. No, that makes a lot of sense.
Are they taking risks? That is one thing I feel hiring managers in general need to take more risks.
I agree too.
I think too often we try to be safe, and in some cases I probably have, but rarely. I really do try to take risks when I can, but I feel like there's so much to gain from considering candidates who may not come from the same industry, who may not have the cookie cutter profile you have in your head, and who will actually bring so much more to the table.
We try to coach that in so many clients, and boy, is it. We have certain clients that are super willing. Certain industries are very tough. Like hospitality is one of them. I mean, right now, this is a much longer story than we get into, but we just have a ton of very qualified hotel folks. And most of our hospitality clients are full service restaurants, bars, and nightclubs. We're actually in the process of signing quite a few hotels right now to change that. But just in the course of trying to take someone with very relevant experience. And again, I know, like, for all my clients out there, I know certain folks are not. If you're a beverage director, you're probably not going to be a great general manager. But there's certain folks out there that have just had beautiful resumes, right price point, and people just won't talk to them. And I think post-pandemic, like, for all the hiring managers to understand out there, we are entering a very different world. Right now, I saw a statistic last week. I think it's 33% of Americans have earned over $10,000 freelancing last year for the first time ever. And again, it's 10K, but that statistic was like 3% previous to the pandemic. So I don't see that going away. We see more and more fractional COOs, C-level executives all across. A lot of brands right now are struggling to make a hiring decision because I think we're in uncertain times. I mean, let's call it what we see, but at the same time, the growth gets killed. And the easiest way for a brand to die is when they start just trying to control the bottom line solely. The bottom line is very important, but if you lose that vision and you kind of get stuck in the mud a little bit, I think people can lose it. So I think that's great information for hiring managers out there, Magali, and I would definitely resonate with that one. And again, for the candidates that are out there, when you're making a transition, because I feel like I've got to speak to them a little bit on there. If you're going from a very high paid position and you're going to make a transition into another industry, you might have to have some flex in your mind. And I'm not saying 15%, but maybe 5%. Maybe it's not even on salary. Maybe it's on title. I know for myself, when we've gone into other industries, like, we've kind of had to go back to zero to really prove who we were to go into there. And in the corporate career, that's a transition I tried to make for myself before I started the business, and I never had success. So I had years of multi-unit operations, and I had a side business as a personal trainer, and it was a 6-figure business, and I was more of a trainer than an operator. But for probably 3 years, Magali, I spent actively with recruiters trying to get anyone from Lifetime Fit just to look at my resume. I would even go back to a GM, getting different times. I just heard how much I wasn't qualified, and then I go into establish some, man, I'd run circles around these guys. Again, that motivated me to be where I am. But for a lot of hiring managers out there, man, most folks that are making a transition are already confident enough to be in front of you, which is completely different than 80% of the candidates that normally walk in. So
right.
I think this is a good one. And so we don't just talk too much, and we're both punching some hiring managers right now because I think I could go off on a tangent. You've had a ton of success digitally transforming concepts. Like, talk to me about, like, what is the key of that success, I guess, and, like, I'll lead you into the next part of that because I'm just really curious about what your thoughts are on where our industry is going currently, But so what is the key to success of transforming, like, digital presence? How do you even start to do that?
Yes. I mean, this is something, I've been doing for the last 15 or 20 years, and it's changed over time how to do it. For example, even the what we call digital transformation, that is now becoming more digital acceleration. So even that is evolving. But it's always going back to growth and driving growth through digital. But initially, it was even introducing digital and e-commerce or D2C, B2C to companies that weren't at all in that space before. And so changing their business model.
So from some standpoints, taking someone that's never been in digital and saying, hey, you've got a great retail location, you're doing great. What if we take it online? And I think even the audience can probably understand the power in that. What about like sometimes that someone's had I don't want to say a bad digital presence, but probably not as good as before you got there. But how do you take it from, I always think, I'll speak about my past. I think if no one's doing anything, it's easy to make an impact to get it out there. But like, I'm really curious about like when you've gone in and just fixed something, because I'm sure you've seen things that are just like, what are we doing here?
and completely revamping, rebuilding. And sometimes you have to rebuild the foundation, or it's just certain pieces. So for me, it's really, it goes back to driving change. And usually when I'm brought on, it is because someone has recognized the need
for a change.
For a change. And you would think, oh, great, the company is ready for change. Not necessarily. It may
kicking and screaming.
Yeah, exactly. So it does take, patience and resilience. But for me, that I consider myself a change agent, and
I like that. Yeah,
and it is really, I've developed change leadership skills because that is really fundamentally what it is about. Whether you are building from scratch or optimizing and accelerating and looking to keep growing more and faster and better, but it comes down to people again. So making sure your top leadership at the company
have to be aligned.
Is supportive, is facilitating change, so that there's
not blocking it, right?
Exactly. So you're minimizing blockers, resistance, so that they facilitate your ability to build trust, to educate, because that's really a big part of it. Look, you have to plan this. It doesn't happen overnight, but it's building a roadmap, and with strategic planning, knowing where to start, what to impact, who to have the conversations with, who are the stakeholders, and who you need to handhold.
It's a lot that's involved in there, though, even when you're saying it. So, I mean, you're identifying the opportunity, you're finding out where the best lift is, you're figuring out the best way to target that. Then you have to make sure that even the company that procured you is willing to make the change. And I got to tell you, that resonates so much with me, because like, hey, aren't you the person that called me to help?
Right.
But I think there's a lot of
you wouldn't be surprised.
Influence without I might be one of the few people that's not, but I mean, I used to be surprised, but I feel a lot of pain in what you're saying right now personally.
No, but I was just going to add, because sometimes when many people think digital transformation, they think, oh, it means we need technology. It means, it's the new tools, the innovative technology that's going to do it. And that's not it. It's a part of it, yes, and especially more and more, today with AI, etc. But it's not only about technology, and technology will allow you to maybe be, to do it faster, to get the right data, which then allows you to reach your goals. But it's a lot about people as well.
Well, and I hear what you're saying too, and I think the light bulb went off. Like, a lot of times the thing that you're transitioning is the people's and probably unwillingness to take a risk and saying, hey, if we're going to do this, you're going to be a little uncomfortable while we do this, but like, this is what you brought me in for, this is what we're going to do. And I find that a lot too. Like, if you can have the best strategy in the world, and especially if you're on the external side, if you can't influence without authority, it's going to be very difficult. And there's some people that you just can't influence without authority, and some people even with authority you can't influence too well. I know they're stuck in their ways.
It takes understanding the business, understanding your customer, and knowing who the stakeholders are, who do you need to influence, who do you need to pitch to, who do you need to present that business plan to, and it can be various people across the organization, and it's not just a board. In some cases it will be, but and it's not just the senior leadership, it's your cross-functional partners as well. And getting them on board. Most of the time, it's getting buy-in from all these different people.
before
and
the plan will work,
departments.
right?
Yep.
Yeah, I get that too. So, I mean, you almost become like a mini negotiator in your world as well.
Yes.
Like you have to
Yes.
be, right? Especially
Yes.
from the external side. Magali, this is so much great information. Look, I would love to have you back on because I think we've touched on so many different topics that, and I mean, not different, but we could just dive deep onto any one of those things,
yes.
you know, from the recruitment manager standpoint to the hiring manager to, you know, what a candidate should do. We're going to leave all your socials down at the bottom there so people can find you. But what I want to tell to any of my folks out there, specifically any of my clients that are looking for a quick marketing lift or any of the candidates that are just looking for some good advice, Magali is one of the most honest, authentic humans I've ever had a conversation with. Like I've truly enjoyed getting to know you, and hopefully, you know, our friendship is impacting both of us in a positive way. But I want to leave your socials down there and let the clients know out there if you're looking for some instant kind of lift. And I'm sorry to say instant after she's saying you guys have got to be willing to work. But I would definitely send you to Magali's way. Is there a LinkedIn or anything that you want to leave? Anything you want to give a shout out for, so how people can find you and follow you and get some more of this great information?
Yes, definitely reach out on LinkedIn. M. Berville, my profile, and I would love to help anyone who reaches out.
I appreciate it so much. So look, we'll link all those socials below. Magali, we're definitely going to have you back on. I want to dive a little bit more into some of this candidate side too, because you actually sparked some of my some other questions I have specifically for marketing and external agencies right now. But I really appreciate the feedback. I really appreciate the time. And for everybody else out there listening, thanks again for tuning in. So we'll have another good guest coming for you guys next week. But we're going to continue this conversation going about best practices really for some hiring managers, which will lead us to a few more things coming out for some new podcasts coming soon. But Magali, thanks again for coming in. Really appreciate the time. And thanks everyone else for tuning in.
Thank you so much.
Always a pleasure.